Carl and Brendan here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life. Got a bit of a new series for you. We decided we're going to start doing this, and we're calling it Exhumation. And the idea is that we'll be exhuming something from the past of rock and metal's history, digging it up, having a look at its impact at the time, and how that's lasted throughout the years. Not in the general metal world, but more on a personal thing. We can't speak for everybody. You know, for every one thing that someone may not care about, another person might have been deeply affected by it. And so it's mainly about how we thought about it then, how we think about it now, what effect it had on us, and so on. We're going to be covering a broad range of subjects, from some stuff that's light and easy and quite silly to stuff that involves death and murder and the likes of that. We'll try and keep it as grounded as possible. It is, of course, opinion-based, some of it, but, you know, enjoy, basically. And we're opening with episode 1, where we're going to discuss Jason Newsted leaving Metallica. And you might think, well, that's not a big deal, but I think it was to both of us at the time.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Yeah. Obviously, Jason Newsted joined Metallica October 1986 till January 2001. Before Metallica, he was a member of Flotsam and Jetsam. After Metallica, he's been involved with Echo Brain, Ozzy, Voivod, and his own band Newsted from 2012 to 2014. He's also the founder of Chop House Record Studio and label based in California, and apparently now is in a acoustic or leading an acoustic band. So, hey, more power to him if he's enjoying himself. Of course, the whole reason why Jason Newsted ended up in a band on September 27th, 1986, during the European leg of the Damage Inc. tour, Metallica's bassist Cliff Burton died when the band's tour bus crashed, which obviously put big shoes to fill straight away. So, first questions first then. Earliest memory of Jason Newsted and Metallica?
I guess I kind of grew up with Jason Newsted and Metallica. You know, that's what I remember.
Yep.
And it was more as I got older, learning about the fact that he had replaced Cliff Burton than the other way around. You know, I don't remember Jason joining Metallica, obviously, because I would have been like 5 or whatever.
Yeah.
I just remember becoming a Metallica fan, and it was Lars, Kirk, James, and Jason. You know,
so you weren't even aware at the time that Cliff even existed?
No, not at first. No, not at first. I mean, as I became a fan, obviously, then you learn, especially as you get into wherever you get in, and then you listen backwards, and then as you did back in the day, you might read an inlay cover and go, "Oh, who's this Cliff Burton guy they're talking about?" I don't know. It just kind of grows from there. But you know, as a youngster getting into metal, getting into Metallica, Jason was just one of the 4 figureheads of Metallica to me. I didn't know all the stuff I know now about their relationships, and you know, the fact that it wasn't all wonderful and rosy all the time.
I mean, obviously at that age, it's you're just trying to enjoy the music. You don't know politics or any inside and outs of that.
Yeah.
But when you sort of picture your mind back to the early days when you were listening to Metallica in any way, shape, or form, was there a specific thing that Jason did or you saw that was like, oh, okay, that made him stand out perhaps more than the rest of the members? Because that's not always been an easy thing for him.
No, musically it wasn't, definitely, because I wasn't probably aware enough musically to be able to say, listen to a song and go, oh, that's Jason, or that's the rhythm guitar. That's the truth of it, you know, being young. The thing that I always remember when I think back about Jason, there's always one picture that always pops back in my head, and it was a poster I had on my wall, actually, of Jason, where he had the long hair, but it was shaved up to the sides.
Oh, yeah.
And like he's got his bass guitar, and he's kind of half headbanging, so his hair's forward, but you've got all the shape bit there. The thing I always remember when I think back at Jason back in those days is that picture pops in my head. And I always saw him as the most metal member of Metallica.
Yeah.
You know, he was more metal. He was the one who did, if he did any backing singing, it was a growled version. He always had a bit of a snarl on. Do you know what I mean? I always thought like, yeah, Jason's like the hardcore one. You know, Lars is out collecting art, Kurt's drinking wine, James is doing what James is doing. And, you know, he's probably headbanging along to Pantera like me. And I think as I got older, I realized, you know, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, he still cut his hair and did the makeup for Black Album.
Yeah, he toed the line, did the company line.
Well, that's what it seems to be. I mean, when I was thinking of this one, where I was like, earliest memories, I was trying to think, because it was your collection that I would have been drawn to, and it was nothing musically. But then I thought of a specific video, and it was Cunning Stunts.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, what from that? And I could picture scenes and all that. And it's mainly, you actually touched upon it, snarling face, during often his additional vocal parts, in particular Creeping Death. A part, obviously, in Creeping Death that's become so iconic that it's actually replicated these days by Rob and so on. And I don't know about you, but I hear it, you know? So that's kind of like the earliest sort of things that when I'm like, okay, that's probably where maybe I noticed. I don't know if I remember it right or if it's just something I grew and noticed later, you know?
Yeah, and he was also like the one who swore. That sounds like a stupid thing to say, but I remember being younger and Metallica didn't really swear in their songs. Yeah, there's a couple here and there, but for the most part, they weren't like full of expletives. But he would always do Creeping Death live, and he would always do "Die, motherfucker, die," and you know. And he was like, yeah, he was a naughty one.
Yeah, the naughty one. And I agree with what you're saying about the whole metal side of things, but we'll move on. And I guess we've got to talk about the biggest thing that surrounds him, which is your thoughts on the murky bass mix on And Justice for All. Obviously, you know, famous story, reasons, potentially back and forth. Did you notice it back then? And do you notice it now?
Not as much as I hear about it.
Yeah.
The weird thing back, you know, I guess the untrained ear or uneducated mind, I used to always think that the problem with And Justice for All was that it was too bassy.
Oh.
Yeah, the sort of the muffled tone of it, I kind of would read that as in it's quite basic. You know, if I put And Justice for All on my speakers, the bass was like it's going to fucking fall out. You know, and I didn't really, attribute that to whether that was coming from a bass guitar or not. You know, so that's the uneducated, untrained bit. Now, I mean, I wouldn't want it any other way, to be honest with you, because it's a classic album to me.
Yeah,
I understand now more that musically it's not quite right. You know, in terms of how it's been mixed and mastered, but at the same time, you know, it's weird, isn't it? Because you're looking back on it, I just can't imagine it any other way. You know, I don't really want to. You know, the songs, I couldn't imagine those songs being cleaner. I couldn't imagine them being produced differently. You know, it's a grimy, dirty album. Jason had just joined it. Yeah, it's strange. It's strange.
I mean, I 100% agree with exactly everything you've said. I never noticed at the time. Even now, when I listen to it, I hear those songs in a way that I'm like, this was perfect. What's everyone complaining about? So it's an odd one on that front. What do you make of the rumor, because there's no truth behind this, that it was done on purpose?
That very much. I would imagine it might have been done subconsciously on purpose, because the one thing that I think as time has gone by has become clear is that as much as I sympathize with a lot of the stuff that happened to Jason, I don't think a lot of it was done maliciously. I think it was done through a band struggling with the loss of their friend.
Yeah.
You know, so I would not be surprised if subconsciously they had altered the bass because it wasn't Cliff, like, but not maliciously to hurt Jason. Because if you wanted to do that, why would you have him in the band? I don't, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's not logical. You know, so
I agree. So I think it's one of those things where I think it's more a rumor that's been spread by people who don't like Metallica as being like, oh, look what the wankers did kind of thing. So Jason was on And Justice, Black, Load and Reload. Do you know he's only credited for 3 tracks with co-writing, which shocked me. And we're going to go through each one basically, and really its legacy, how much you enjoy the track and so on. So number 1 is Blackened off And Justice for All, which is hilarious that it's Blackened off that album.
Yeah.
I love Blackened though. I fucking love this track.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, it's an absolutely phenomenal song.
Yeah.
Opening track, brilliant song. Love it.
Yeah. It's incredible that he's credited in that. I couldn't believe when I was like, wait, And Justice, amazing.
Yeah.
Number 2, My Friend of Misery from the self-titled Black album.
Yeah, weirdly, one of my, as time passed, became probably one of my favorite songs from that album. Actually, it's got my favorite solo in it.
It's a great track. One, again, I agree with you that I've grown to appreciate in time rather than back when I first listened to it.
Yeah.
Well, the last one, I personally think still sucks. Where the Wild Things Are from Reload.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of great to be found on Reload anyway.
There's a couple good tracks on there. It's also got the best written Metallica lyrics, isn't it, in Fixer, which I say every single time. But yeah, this isn't one that I particularly like. I'd be a bit annoyed if I was Jason that of all the bloody songs I'd probably been involved in some way, that they stuck my name on that one. I'd be asking them to remove it. Just give me 2 songs, guys.
It really does show just how little. I mean, when you're there for 4 albums and a very long period of time, he was there for 14, 15 years, that he only got credited for 3 tracks, shows how little input he was able to have at the time, which of course does lead to a story departure. Now, he actually performed his last show as Metallica's bass player on November 30th, 2000 at Music Awards show of all places. And the story of his departure goes something like this. During a meeting between the members of Metallica in January 2001, Newsted proposed that the band should take a year-long hiatus, and he would use that time to focus on his side project, Echobrain. When the other band members rejected Newsted's proposals, he chose to quit the band. Jason put his own statement revealing his departure was based on private and personal reasons and the physical damage I have done to myself over the years while playing the music I love. Now, I remember this statement. What did you think when you first heard this statement? That specific Jason Newsted part about physical damage and private and personal reasons.
Back in those days, I think I always assumed it was a kind of management speech for I've been kicked out.
Oh, okay.
To be honest with you, I think by this sort of time I was well aware that he wasn't fully embedded in the band. He'd been there for a long time, and it wasn't. There was like the 3 of them and Jason.
Mm.
I kind of I don't even know how true some of this is. In my mind, I remember the kind of rumor mill was that he'd been fired.
Yeah.
I think that kind of stood on for quite a long time after it. That Metallica basically bullied him out of the band. And I remember using the fact that no, it's because he's injured. He has no choice as defenses for Metallica, as I would have back then. Sort of jumped to their defense at any sort of besmirch on their character.
Yeah.
The weird thing with it is, I wouldn't say that I was like devastated by it, because for me, I guess James and Lars were the irreplaceable members, and Kirk to a degree. I liked Jason a lot. I was a fan of Jason. And I know this is probably insulting to every bassist in the history of time out there, but he was the bass guitarist. Metallica would continue on without him, and that was my core concern.
Yeah,
it wasn't the band breaking up; it was a member leaving, and in that I was okay.
I think that's a fair point. It's weird because I remembered that when that statement came out, I bought Hook, Line, and Sinker, and I felt sorry for him. I think he was run down and had a lot of injuries because of touring and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, we'll get into what's supposedly the truth or part of the truth anyway. It's lots of statements back and forth, including an incredible one. I don't know if I wrote it down. Oh, I did. I'll get to it in a minute then. But so later we would find out that Jason's desire to do Echobrain had caused a rift between him and James, particularly. And Hetfield had said several different things, but the one that I chose to take that I liked summed it up, which is basically James said, when someone does a side project, it takes away from the strength of Metallica. And James nowadays even admits that he was too tight and holding on to Metallica and couldn't envision this and that and so on. So they have admitted like fault on that sort of thing. But what's your thoughts on that kind of statement? The idea that someone couldn't do a side project because it would take away from the strength of Metallica.
Yeah, I kind of 2 angles on this. I totally understand what he's saying. I get what he's saying. Metallica is a machine. It's a big enterprise, and it's kind of that you're either all in or you're not.
Yeah.
This idea that you're going to flit in and out of Metallica was unacceptable to James, and James was the captain of the ship. Therefore, but at the same time, I can kind of try and see it from like a creative artist perspective, where Metallica are subsequently not allowing you to fulfill your creative ambitions while simultaneously blocking you from creating them anywhere else. So I understand why Jason may not have been okay with it, but from James's perspective, James, Lars, Kirk, no member of Metallica ever did side projects. That's a thing in the band, Can you imagine, like, I don't know, Kirk off or any of them off doing things, and Metallica has to go and hold while they're doing their things? It just doesn't seem to be the way Metallica are run. So I guess to a degree, Jason, as much as I understand why he would have wanted to, because he wasn't being treated fairly, if the rest of the band, like the four founders of the band and all that, have all committed to this notion of, no, we're all 100% committed to Metallica and Metallica only, then the newest member in is always going to have a problem suggesting that he wants to do it anything differently.
Yeah, I mean, you make great points. I remember at the time I thought they were quite villainous for it. Particularly, I don't think it was helped by the events afterwards, which we'll touch upon now, which is, of course, Some Kind of Monster, Hetfield going to rehab, and Saint Anger. That was a couple of years where it looked like Jason was right and this band's falling apart.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, the whole statement, like, it would be villainous if every other member of Metallica were doing side projects and they just said to Jason, you're the only one not allowed to. That's the reason why, I never took it as a kind of cruel statement. But, the bit that, until Some Kind of Monster came out, obviously a lot of that stuff wasn't really known. I think it was known, like, there were rumors, there was known that James had alcohol problems. It was known that the band weren't in a great place. There were rumors of that, but no one knew the extent of it.
Yeah.
I guess seeing Some Kind of Monster makes me understand a little bit more why Jason suggested they go on hiatus, because that's always the bit that confused the hell out of me. Because if you take that statement, that fact as it is, without Some Kind of Monster and all that stuff being known, Jason, after the guy that just won an award and played at some award ceremony, then goes, oh, guys, I think we should put Metallica on hold while I go off and do my side project.
Yeah.
And if you take that just as it is, you'd be like, what the fuck? No, you know what I mean? But Jason will have obviously known that there were bigger problems, and maybe that's why he was suggesting they take a break.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that wasn't really released to the general public back then.
It makes sense now.
Seeing Some Kind of Monster does two things for you. Like, one, it makes you feel sorry for Jason and for Kirk to a degree, actually, in that, because both of them kind of get weighed down on quite heavily.
Yes.
And at the same time, though, it also makes me sympathize for Metallica, for James and for Lars, because a lot of what they were doing, whether it was upsetting Jason or not, wasn't being done out of viciousness. It was being done out of the fact that, a mixture of missing Cliff, a mixture of all the feuds they brought up, a mixture of substance abuse and tiredness and everything. They were basically cranky boys, and Jason was the butt of a lot of it. I don't see a lot of anything that, I don't know about you, but I don't look at a lot of what happened back there now and see an awful lot of malice in it.
No, not now.
I think I understand that there was some shitty circumstances out there. And so Jason would probably quite rightly feel that he was wronged. And he probably was, but I don't think he was wronged maliciously.
I agree with you. I don't think, I'd said I thought villainous at the time, but time has changed things, statements and understanding of what we know and see on. And I guess the big question there is, then, do you agree with his decision to leave?
Yeah, I mean, it was right for him. So it was right for him at the time. I don't know if in real life he agrees with it himself, because he's obviously happy and he's done well.
Yeah.
I've read quite recent articles, actually, or recent enough, where financially he's very, very stable off of the back of Metallica still.
Good.
Whether it's royalties from albums he was involved in or money that he had invested well while being in Metallica. So, he didn't go to Metallica, get paid nothing, and then get kicked out. Like, sometimes it's put across, like, the poor little Jason got absolutely treated like shit. Yeah. He did well enough in his years in Metallica to live comfortably for the rest of his life without working another job if he chose. So he didn't do terribly out of all of this. And I don't know, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because I guess he left at the point where a lot of people would argue Metallica peaked. Sort of the end of the peak. I know we had Load and Reload, but then after that,
downhill for a while.
Yeah, and there was, you're talking like that's the period where we start getting into, obviously, Saint Anger aside, 7-8 year gaps between albums, and to be honest, if he probably stuck it out for Saint Anger and come out the other end of that, he probably would have had 8 years to work on Echo Brain.
If James let him.
If James had let him. So it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? I think it was right for him. I, as a fan, was okay with it, because it didn't matter anymore, to be honest with you. It wasn't even about Jason anymore, because Jason left, and then Saint Anger and Some Kind of Monster happened, and actually, like all that sort of stuff was happening around that time, and Jason leaving was almost small in comparison to all the shit that was going down.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I agree. I still these days go, he made the right decision because it was the right one for him, and he thinks that as well. And of course, obviously, his replacement many years down the line would be Rob Dreo. And I don't know about you, but for me, the guy's a perfect fit for Metallica now.
Yeah,
I thought it was weird at first, but now I completely get it.
Yeah, it works. They all seem happy and they all seem comfortable. Yeah, I mean, it's good. I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? That's the thing. It's like, it's not like Rob joined the band and they're, releasing an album every 3 years and writing material together and going out on tour every year. So he's done a lot of shows. He's been involved in a handful of albums. You know what I mean? So Rob Trujillo, I don't even know, but he's probably been in the band year-wise, not too far off the length of time Jason has been.
You're not wrong, actually. What? Yeah. So if you're like, I don't know when he joined, but it must have been like 2004, 5, that kind of time.
Yeah, it's a while back, wasn't it?
5, that's 15 years.
But if you look at the output in that time, the creative output, it's very, very different. So it's quite difficult to know that. First of all, I don't think what none of this I don't think was ever about Jason. I think if Rob Trujillo had been the guy who joined after Clifford died, it would have all been about him.
Yes,
it would have been anyone. It didn't matter who it was. It wasn't about the person. But also, like, if Metallica was still doing what they were doing back then, releasing an album very, very regularly, touring consistently, being stuck with each other all the time, would the relationship with the new bassist be as cool and comfortable? It's hard to say.
It is speculation more than anything else, but that's the point of this, to kind of get your feelings on it.
Yeah,
come to the end of this.
James spends as much time making coffee tables, doesn't he, these days, as he does like shouting at bassists.
So the guys are on good terms now. That is the important thing. April 4th, 2009, he joined Metallica for their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. December 5th, 7th, 9th, and 10th, 2011, he actually reunited with Metallica during all four of their 30th anniversary shows, and performed several songs with the band, which is awesome news. And I found this statement, and to me, it's amazing. And it actually goes back to 2003. So after Some Kind of Monster, that kind of period and stuff on after, and it came from Lars. And it's one of those great things from Lars where it's like, and it's kind of what we just talked about. So it goes like this. The ironic thing is that the model for what would have been the perfect Metallica in Jason's mind is the one that exists now. That is kind of ironic. It's also a little sad because Jason's a good guy and he put a lot of effort into the band for many years. And in retrospect, he was never fully appreciated into the band. Then when he tried to go elsewhere to satisfy his creative needs, he was told, barked at, that he couldn't. Jason was the sacrificial lamb for our spiritual and mental growth as well as our creative growth. And it just sucks. It's medieval. I think that's wonderful. And it really does. It's true. To me, it says everything you need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. And it's nice to, be able to look back on it all and be able to just accept the fact that, they were just a collection of human beings in a troubling situation, all of them, including Jason.
Yeah.
Jason made a decision that was right for him. Metallica went on and made decisions about their lifestyles and everything that ended up right for them. And they all came out of it as friends at the other end. So,
and last but not least, then, do you think you could ever rejoin Metallica on a permanent basis?
Bassist.
Yeah, bassist, bass.
Nah. No, I don't think he'd want to either. I think he's now his own creative avenue.
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, for anybody, even if Robert left and he went back, I mean, first of all, I don't think the opportunities are ever going to be there now. I don't think this idea of Metallica changing lineups or anything will ever happen. I think the next time that happens will be probably when they stop playing.
Yeah.
But I just, I don't think if he went back into the band that James and Lars are any less strong about how the songs are built and who inputs. And I think Jason's almost like he's been given a taste of freedom. He wouldn't put himself back in a cage.
It would be fucking weird. I agree.
It'd be cool to see, an anniversary show or something like that in the future with my 4 original members playing together. I would like that. But
love it. There you go. There's our first attempt at these videos down. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon and help us out over there. That's patreon.com/gbhbl, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?